Our world is obsessed with material success. As spiritual seekers, we often look at success and failure in a very different way. And when we go beyond the purely materialistic viewpoint of the world, we see that both failure and success are necessary in our spiritual journey. Now, in this podcast episode, Vajin and myself dive deep into the spiritual perspectives on failure and success. How can we make spiritual progress through failure and success? And what lessons can we learn from them, from failure especially? And how can it strengthen us and provide us the wisdom and growth that we're looking for? If you cannot escape the world's narrow definitions of failure and success, then you'll always find yourself struggling with the perspectives that others might have of you, instead of growing into the best version of yourself and defining success and failure in ways that are meaningful and helpful to you. I really loved this conversation that we had, and it really taught me how to have new perspectives and put failure and success in a new and meaningful light. And I hope it does the same for you. Enjoy this episode.
Yeah, and I think our culture has got an unhealthy fixation on success. And so if we look at celebrities or we look at sports people, we put always shining the spotlight on the success. And it makes us have an unrealistic perception of the world, because
I would like to redefine success in a much broader sense. Like, for me, to be successful in life is not to be wealthy or to be famous or to have tremendous name or even to achieve things, but to have.
And so this is part of the problem, that we think, oh, this is the result that I need to be happy. Like, if I get this particular outer circumstances, then my life will be going in the right direction, and then I can relax and be happy. But the thing is, we don't know.
So failure is it's like falling down, right? It's a temporary setback. You haven't reached your goal, you fall down. But what do you do after that? You get up and you try again, and you get up and you try again. And a real failure would be somebody who. So maybe to start out, like, what is failure? And I thought about what is failure, and I got kind of to the definition of failure is you have to first have a goal that you consciously or unconsciously formulate for yourself. And then the failure is if you do not reach that goal within the limits that you've set for yourself. I think that's a definition of failure that we can work with, right?
And I think one of the things for failure to exist, there has to be a particular expectation. And so in some ways, that's what failure is the when you have an unfulfilled expectation and you feel, oh, well,
Yeah,
that was failure. Like, I expected,
exactly.
wanted this, I desired this, and it didn't work out.
Yes, and I guess you could say that failure is the obverse of the coin. Then the other side is success. So success and failure are opposites. And interestingly enough, in our day-to-day life, we give much more value to the experience of success than to the experience of failure. But if we look at it from a spiritual point of view, if we zoom out, I think both of them are just experiences, and they're leading us to the same goal, you could say. They're both leading us to progress. That's the idea, I think, behind failure and success, that they're experiences that are guiding us on our journey. And sometimes we need failures to grow, and sometimes we need successes to grow. And there's a balance between the two.
Yeah, and I think our culture has got a unhealthy fixation on success. And so if we look at celebrities or we look at sports people, we give more and more attention to the people who are successful, obviously. And so we put always shining the spotlight on the success. And it makes us have an unrealistic perception of the world, because for every successful athlete or business person or actor or whatever the field is, there's infinitely more people who are in that field who failed than there are those very few rare cases of success. And
Or maybe they haven't failed, but they haven't had the same amount of success as the
yeah,
others have.
yeah, but I think having that right relationship where you're not afraid of failure, because I think that's the thing that paralyzes a lot of people and stops them actually chasing after their dreams or going for things, or even just trying to transform their lives. There's this deep-seated fear that, well, what happens if I fail? I'll be a failure if I try and fail. And that's a really sad thing, that people are more concerned about trying and failing than they are about not even trying at all. And that's a really interesting thing because I think from the spiritual point of view, and Sri Chinmoy has talked about this a lot, that failure only, or the true failure is only when we stop trying. So when we
Exactly.
give up our efforts and no longer are trying to transform our lives or trying to grow or trying to make progress, that's the only time we've really failed. Everything else is simply an experience upon the journey towards growth and perfection.
Yeah, exactly. And Sri Chinmoy said, if we're not afraid to fail, we're bound to succeed. So if you
Mm.
can conquer that fear of failure, that's already clearing the road to success. But again, I think we also need to redefine success, because when what we understand as success in our material life is what we talked about: wealth, success, fame, status, all these things that we associate with success in the material world. But I would like to redefine success in a much broader sense as happiness. Like, for me, to be successful in life is not to be wealthy or to be famous or to have tremendous name or even to achieve things, but to have a truly happy life, like to have peace, inner peace, peace of mind, which is synonymous with happiness, and to be spiritually fulfilled as and to live your true potential as a human being. That to me is success, and not this kind of narrow definition of success in the material world.
Yes, and I totally agree with that because one thing that I see is that you can win badly, but you can also fail gloriously. And so what I mean by that is, say I had a goal, so let's say in a sporting event that my goal was to do a certain level of performance or run a certain time, and if I went out there and I did it, but my consciousness, the way I went about it, was very aggressive and very much lacking any sense of poise or balance. And I was trying to achieve my goal by hook or by crook and trying to cut corners where I could. And I may achieve the outer success I was looking for, but there's going to be some part of me inwardly that is going to be unfulfilled because the way I went about achieving that goal or chasing after that goal was using all of my vital power or my aggression or my sneaky, devious mind. And it's not, wouldn't be proud of how I went about that.
Yeah, I'm reminded of an event that recently happened. We both love the World Cup. We're both fans of track and field, and recently we had the World Championships in Tokyo, track and field. And there was an event, the triple jump for the men. I don't know if you saw that,
Yeah,
but
I
it was
did.
won by this Portuguese guy. And before that, there was an Italian guy who jumped to the lead. When he did his last jump, he did a PB. He did a fantastic jump. He like did his best result ever. Plus, he was in the lead. And then this Portuguese guy came, and he was the last one. He was also the favorite, and he jumped further, so he defeated the Italian guy. But then I looked at his reaction, and I was so disgusted. He was all ego. It was all him, and the Italian guy was coming up to him to kind of like congratulate him. And he would just not even look at him. He would really just like slap him, really brief handshake, and immediately he would go to the audience and tap himself on the back. And he was shouting to the camera, "Who is the greatest? Who is the greatest?" And the Italian guy was just over the moon. I mean, he was second place, but he was so happy, and just you could see he was so fulfilled. And I just looked at that Portuguese guy. I was just like, man, I feel sorry for you. That is like bad, to me, that's like bad winning.
Yeah, I did see that. And yeah, when he kept on shouting to the camera, who's the greatest? Who's the greatest?
Yeah,
Yeah, probably this attitude is not the attitude of a great because
exactly.
I
It's
think
in, for me, it's insecurity, I think. It
yeah,
comes from an insecure position.
I think when you look back and you see the types of athletes that really transcend their sport, they're people who have some human qualities that go beyond simply beyond their.
Winning or losing.
Yeah, it's like so for me, someone like Carl Lewis was someone who was such a champion over such a long period of time, but really did it with such a grace and humility and had the completely right attitude towards his opponents. And then I remember reading a book by him, and his book was great because he talks about in his younger years that he actually wasn't that good as an athlete. And so it took him a long time to grow into his body. And so he was getting beaten a lot when he was a junior athlete. And he had this great comment that you first of all have to learn how to lose before you learn how to win. And it's like the idea is there that you need to learn how to deal with the painful experiences, and so you can deal with them with some grace and poise and dignity. And so then if you can do that, then you're in a better position to actually become a champion, because then when you win, you don't allow it to go to your head, or you don't become bloated with pride, or you don't allow those moments to capture you and to disrespect your opponents. Because I think we watching it from the outside, when you see someone doing like this gentleman was, where he wasn't showing respect to his competitors and he wasn't showing respect to the fans or the event even, it leaves you with a bad taste in your mouth. So even though you can't consciously put your finger on why you disliked that experience, there's something about that lack of respect for the event and for the competitors that really doesn't sit well with us, because we're tribal people. Like we're meant to operate in a group, and when you see someone acting in a way that really would in previous times make you an outcast or push you to the side, it just naturally doesn't look good to us. We see that, oh,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the
Yeah.
right way to deal with your success.
Yeah, and also in the competition, you also need second places, third places, fourth places. Like if you look at it as a game, the game of life, not
Yeah,
everybody can come first place. Even in life, not everybody can be a famous person, a rich person. You know, the game of life is, I think it's designed to have diversity in all spheres. So there's rich
yeah,
and poor, there's tall and there's small, there's fat and there's skinny. And all these different hues and shades are necessary to have the game. So as an athlete, as a professional athlete, also, the challenge is to be happy with your placing if you did your best. So I think, you know, if you look at it from an athletic point of view, if you did the very best you can do, that's a victory. That's to me a success. And the placing is like secondary to that. And I know that's for professional athletes, that's really hard to accept, I guess, because it's their livelihood. But in the game of life, if we look at it from a broader perspective, you have to do the best you can, and then it's not the result that you get. You have to accept that, whatever that result is. Sometimes it's a success, and sometimes it's a failure. And then there's this famous quote in the Bhagavad Gita when Krishna says, "You have the right to act, but you are not entitled to the fruit of your action." It's
mm,
one of the most famous verses in the Gita, and that says it all. That's like you can act, but whatever the result of your action is, whether it's success or failure, you have to accept it with equanimity, with
yeah.
poise.
And that is the right attitude to the game of life. Well, like when you're trying to live the best possible life you can, you really need to be focused on the taking the right actions and being present and giving yourself fully to the day-to-day activities of life. and and it's like a surrender. It's like surrendering the outcome and just thinking to yourself, right, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and live my life in the best possible way I can on a daily basis, and then understanding that whatever the outcome is from that is going to be the best possible outcome for your long-term well-being. Because the thing we do is that we have this unrealistic expectation and idea of how well we can predict the future. And so this is part of the problem, that we think, oh, this is the result that I need to be happy. Like if I get this particular outer circumstances, then my life will be going in the right direction, and then I can relax and be happy. But the thing is, we don't know what the journey of our life is going to look like in the future. It's like we're looking at or we're taking part in an amazing story, but the story is being written on a day-to-day basis, so we can't predict which direction the story is going to go in. And it's almost like the acceptance of the experiences we're having. These are part of the story of our lives, and it won't be for many years that we can look back and then say, oh, I see now how that particular experience at the time that I thought was a failure, or I thought was a terrible thing, is actually a key chapter in that story of our lives. And it's like I've talked about before, that very often, if you talk to someone who has a catastrophic or a terrible event in their lives, if you ask them, do you wish that didn't happen? Nearly everyone, when they've gone through that experience, because in some ways those experiences force you to learn to accept life. Because say you become paralyzed or you get a serious illness, you can't escape from that experience. There's no way out. The only way out is going through the experience. So you have to accept it. And at some point where you have accepted and moved through it, you realize that there was so much growth and progress in this experience that you didn't want to have, and in some ways that you would call a failure or a terrible thing to happen. But it transforms you in ways that you can't imagine. And so, yeah, I really love that idea from the Gita, because I think it's an idea that all of us can take into our lives, and it will make all of our lives better, no matter what field of endeavor you're part of or what activities you do. If you can have that attitude of, I'm going to turn up and I'm going to give the best of myself to the world and to this activity, and then whatever the outcome is, I'm totally surrendered to. I have trust or faith in the universe, and this is also ties in with our idea of whether we believe we live in a friendly or a hostile universe. If you feel as though we live in a friendlier universe and the universe has your growth and your best interest in is fundamental inside the universe, you'll say, oh, well, obviously this experience is part of my journey and it's got some lessons to teach me, and I can take that on board and I can have faith and accept that.
Yeah, and in the moments that may be very hard, because if you go through failure, or if you go through a very tough experience, you're maybe in a fight with other people, or you have to stand up for your values, and you have to, you know, kind of are rubbing. How do you say that? You're like fighting with other people. That
Yeah.
can be very unpleasant in the moment, and then it's hard to, the philosophy. It's part of the game of life, but it's very hard in those moments to kind of accept that with poise and with happiness. But I guess when you go through it, and then when you go to the other end of it, you see that that was meant for your growth. So
Yeah. And I think when we see people actually living it out, people do recognize that when we see people. But like a good example, keeping on the sporting theme, is Eliud Kipchoge is commonly considered the greatest marathon runner of all times, and he won multiple Olympics and won nearly all of the marathon majors, and he's now in his 40s. So he was the first man to run sub 2 hours for the marathon. And so he's in his 40s now, and in the last 2 years, he was winning every marathon he did. In the last few years, his abilities and his performances have started to decline. And people were always talking about that. There's a great saying in sport that Father Time is always undefeated. And
mm.
and it's basically saying that no matter how good you are and how long you've been the best for, a certain point will come, a tipping point will be reached where suddenly your capacity starts to decline. And that's the same for everyone in every field of endeavor. It's that you're always on a journey where you start off as a beginner and you spend time and energy and developing some mastery and capacity. And for a really long time, your abilities in any field can start to increase and improve. But at some point, you'll start to find that you'll start to plateau. And then that plateau does not last forever. And at some point, you'll start to find that your performances in some way or another will start to decrease. And Eliud Kipchoge is continuing to race. So he just did the Sydney Marathon and he finished in ninth place. And so there's a lot of pundits and fans online who are saying, oh, he should retire now. He's ruining his legacy. And I think that is actually also a problem in our society, that we don't actually like to see people aging and getting old and losing their capacity, because in some way it reminds us that that's going to happen to us too. So there's many people that actually prefer someone who is at the very top. As soon as they start to lose and start to drop from that, we want them to go away. It's like, just get off the screen. Like, I don't want to watch this. I don't want to see this side of the storyline, because we want to see the young people, becoming successful and,
yeah.
having this glory. We don't want to see the other side where they've become old and their capacity is decreasing. But Eliud Kipchoge, at the press conference after the Sydney Marathon, so he finished in ninth place, and he was really happy. He was really cheerful. He still ran an amazing time. And he said, I know many people out there are saying that I should stop or retire, but I love doing this. It's like, this is my hobby, and this is the thing that gives me joy. And you see that he's totally non-attached to the results. He doesn't mind that his performances are not where they were a few years ago, because he still enjoys the entire experience and the entire process. And I actually saw some video footage from the race, and the race has some sections where runners are running in one direction, heading out to some turnaround point, and then the faster runners are on the other side of the road coming back. And so you see when he's running on one side of the road and he's running towards the other runners, thousands of runners are just stopping and they've got their phones out and they're filming him. And they're actually just wanting to take the moment in the middle of their own race. They're basically stopping to cheer for him and to applaud him. And you see in some ways that he has transcended the sport. And it's in his consciousness that he's done that. The way he is going about his business and the way he's going about the activity, people just love him and love that consciousness that he's bringing to it. And so I thought that was so revealing that there's some people who are saying, "Oh, you should stop now. You're ruining your legacy." But in fact, the people out there doing the activity and taking part, they're
Yeah.
still, it's perhaps he's even more inspiring to them because that's the
Yeah,
most
exactly.
relatable.
It's beautiful if you can age and still find challenges in life and do your best and not retire. Like our teachers for Chinmoy was all about never giving up, and tying into the theme of failure. As you said before, we only fail if we stop to try, and you should never give up. And that's like eventually success will come. So failures, they say failures are the pillars of success. And so the successful businessmen and the successful actors and the successful artists and engineers and people, they have also experienced failure. It's not that they never failed. It's just that they got up every time after they failed, they decided to get up again. So failure is like, it's like falling down, right? It's a temporary setback. You haven't reached your goal, you fall down. But what do you do after that? You get up and you try again, and you get up and you try again. And a real failure would be somebody who, after falling down, would just not want to get up again. Would just say, like, this
Yeah,
is the end. This is the end of my experience. I failed.
I'm
Okay,
down.
then that is the real failure. You're down and out. But if you decide to get up again, that very act of getting up means that you will be successful eventually. Like, it doesn't matter how long it takes, you will absolutely be successful in what you undertake. I mean, of course, the goal should be realistic. It's like if I start wanting to train to break the world record in a marathon, I will never succeed at that. But if it's a goal that is really comes from within and is inspiring to me and is definitely reachable, then I will reach it, no matter how long it takes. And there's this beautiful analogy of a young child that is learning how to walk. Like if a child is like a year old, they start to take their first steps. And what happens when a child takes their first steps is, of course, they fall down. And they get up again and try again. They take a few steps, they fall down. They get up again, they take a few steps, and they fall down. And if that little child would have our attitude, our adult attitude, after 3 or 4 or 5 times of falling down, it would probably say to its parents, Mom, Dad, this walking business is not for me.
Yeah.
I'll just continue crawling for the rest of my life. And we would all still be crawling if that was our attitude. But this child has this tremendous inner urge to just get up again and try again. And if it does that enough times, then the day will come when it learns how to walk and then, run and play and jump and do all the things. So that same inner urge that little child had, that we all had when we were a year old, that is the attitude that we need in life, where we feel no matter how many times you fall down, just get up, try again, and the day will come when you will become an expert at that field. And that's the same for meditation. Like we've also, we talk a lot about meditation and having a spiritual practice. And meditation is one of the hardest things to master. It's one of the most difficult things. It's more difficult than track and field, than like becoming an engineer or becoming a PhD. Like
Mm.
real meditation, to quiet the mind and to still the mind and to become tranquil, poised, is extremely difficult. But everybody can do it. It's not like you have to have a talent for it. It's just that you have to continue to practice. Practice, 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 and the day will come when you will become an expert at that.
Yeah, and it's remembering and understanding that each time you fail in meditation, let's say, let's say in meditation, a failure would be when you allow you find yourself taken away by your thoughts. They've carried you off, and you're on some merry journey of your thoughts. But it's just simply recognizing that your thoughts have taken you away and then coming back to that present moment, coming back to where you are and the stillness inside you. And that will happen for someone in their meditation practice. Over, if you're practicing meditation for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, the amount of times that you have been carried away by your thoughts and then you've had to bring yourself back, it's an uncountable number. But it's each time you do it, you strengthen yourself somewhat. And it's
Yeah.
like the analogy of going to the gym. It's like you don't go and lift the weight once to become strong. It's like you have to lift those weights like and over and over and over again. And and like Sri Chinmoy in his weightlifting journey. So weightlifting was something that Sri Chinmoy took up later on in his life when he could no longer run as he wanted to, and he progressed in a fantastic way. But what was most striking to me was his ability to deal with failure as a weightlifter. Because when you're
Mm.
trying to lift really heavy weights and you're trying to increase your ability, you're always going to come up against a weight that you can't actually move. And so he would talk about some of these heavy weights that he tried to shift. And the weights that he lifted was incredible. But what was incredible to me was his patience and his poise in dealing with all of the failures of it. Because he would talk sometimes that he might have made 300 or 400 attempts to lift
Well,
this particular.
there was one famous weight that was for Jim was 300-pound lift that took him, I think, over 300 attempts. Like normally he would progress quite fast in the
Yeah.
beginning. He started out with 40 pounds and pretty quickly was at 100 pounds. And then in the beginning, his progress was quite fast. And then he hit this wall, this plateau at 300 pounds. And it took him months. I think it was like 314 or 15 attempts. I recently came across it. I read it.
Yeah.
And we would go about every single attempt with the same enthusiasm, the same joy, and totally detached. Like when he failed, he just got up and tried again. And then after like 315 attempts, he finally lifted it. And then he could go on, and then his progress again became quite fast. It's like he broke through this barrier.
Yeah, and that's the amazing thing because if we think in our lives, how many times have we really serious, like something that we really want to achieve? Have we really taken 315 like really serious attempts? Because I think for what happens for most of us, we try it once or twice or 5 times or 10 times, and at some point your mind just gets discouraged.
Yeah.
And you say that to yourself, if you tried to lift something 100 times and 100 times you were unable to move it at all, you would think, well, probably I just don't have the ability to do this. It's like that
Yeah.
seems obvious outcome to take away from that. But the fact that there was some vision and that cheerful intensity to keep trying again and keep warming up and putting all of your effort into trying that activity again. For me, that's perhaps the most remarkable and inspiring part of that story, that wow, like how many things have I done in my life and perhaps haven't achieved the success I was looking for. But did I really try 300 times with all of my intensity and all of my effort?
Yeah.
And because we kind of think that after a few times, oh well, that's obviously not going to happen. But it's like if you have that relentless willingness to keep trying again and again, perhaps
Well,
after times.
maybe as a child you fell down 300 times when you wanted to learn how to walk. Like that is like coming back. We all had that little period where we fell down hundreds of times maybe.
Yeah.
And we did feel that we were divinely inspired to learn how to walk. So and we all learn how to walk. So we all have it in us.
Yeah, I've got this nice comment that Sri Chinmoy made where he was actually asked, how do we overcome the fear of failure? And so he said, always take failure as an experience. Do not take it as a finished product or as the culmination of an experience, but rather as the process of an experience. If you think that failure is the end of your experience, then you're mistaken. In a long race, one may start very slowly, but then gradually he increases his speed and eventually he reaches his goal. But if he thinks that since his start was slow, he will not be able to reach the destination, then he is making a deplorable mistake. If there is no failure, naturally you will run the fastest. But if there is failure, take it as an experience that is just beginning. The end is the success. And then who can say that you have failed? Who is the judge? If you are the judge, then no matter what you do and what you achieve, you always feel that you have failed. But if someone else is the judge, then he will know whether your so called failure is real. He will call your experience and a failure only when you do not want to overcome what you feel is wrong within you. When you give up the spiritual life, that is failure. Otherwise, there is no such thing in my terminology as failure.
Yeah, beautiful.
And so, yeah,
So
captures the idea that it's really failure comes from our consciousness. It's not what happens in the world that is a failure or a success. It's really our own consciousness. And the real failure is when we become discouraged and we lose the willingness to try and transform our nature.
yeah, I have to think about these very cynical people who, when they age, they've seen it all. They've seen all the, the ills of the world, and they think this world is never going to change. It's always going to be, a veil of tears, and nothing will ever come of it. Like that to me is a failure. When you feel that, you look around you, you see the problems of the world, but you don't believe in any solution. You don't believe that things can improve and become better. And like if you look at the world like that, and then you apply that to your own life, you know, we are here to improve. We are here to grow and to engage in this adventure that is life. And it doesn't matter your age. Like it's challenging when you age. There's definitely brings new challenges, and the world itself is full of problems. And but we are such amazing beings. Like we have so much potential within us, and it just seems just such a waste to feel that nothing can ever come of it. Like we don't really want to try. You have to. We need some effort in order to bring that potential to the fore. Like it doesn't come out of the blue. It needs our conscious effort, and that's why failure is sometimes necessary. Because if you would have success right away, you would not value it. It's like if success comes spontaneously, like you would say, oh yeah, it's just, I didn't have to put any real effort into it. But if you get success after many, many failures, that success tastes so much sweeter. And I remember when I was training for the sub 230 marathon, we both ran a sub 230 marathon, and we both trained quite hard for it. And when I finally achieved it after many years of training, it was such an amazing feeling. It was like the perfect race, the perfect conditions. But that race came only after quite a few failures, let's say, quite a few races where I was, didn't achieve the goal, was kind of stuck there. Sometimes I felt like I'm never gonna reach it. And then this magical day came when everything came together, like this magical training period of a few months when all the trainings went well, when my form was improving, and I could kind of feel it coming. It was like a really magical feeling. I was like, yeah, this is the time. And then when it comes, like the success, it tastes so sweet. It's such a beautiful memory.
Yeah, and it's a good thing. Like if we're thinking of marathon running, like who has really tried 315 times to run the marathon PB? Maybe that's the magic number. Maybe
Yeah.
if it fails again and again, you just haven't. You've just got to keep going until you get to the 315. I mean, I could tell my story about running a sub 230 marathon. So I think I ran my first marathon in around 2003. And so my goal from the very beginning was to run under 2.5 hours, which is like a really good threshold of, it's like a really clear time goal. So that's one of the reasons why people like it. But it really kind of separates like good amateur runners from really, sort of higher level or excellent amateur runners, because there's not that many people who ever run under that benchmark. So it's something that people really strive after, and there's a lot of people out there in the world who would love to run that time. And so from 2003 onwards, my first marathon I did, I think I ran 2:41. So I was already relatively in the ballpark. And then I started to improve, and I got down to 2:32. And then for many years, I was stuck at this point. And so I ran 2:32, then I ran 2:31, and I just could never somehow find the way to get through that barrier. And so, and it feels like a very strong barrier that you're trying to break through. And especially in marathon running, you can be on track for a really long time. And then at some point, especially in the last third of the race or the last quarter of the race, you just slowly start to lose a few seconds here, and you can feel it when you're doing it. It's like you can feel it slipping through your fingers. And so it I tried many, many times, and I was really stuck at this point of just outside 2.5 hours. And so what happened for me was that I actually had to completely change my focus for a period of time. So I never gave up on the goal, but I actually changed my focus from running marathons for a period of time to running ultra marathons. So in 2009, I did my first ultra marathon, and I ended up on a very different path for some years of running ultra marathons on the trails and traveling around the world and getting to do these races. And it wasn't until 2015, so it was, I think my last serious marathon, before that, was maybe 4 or 5 years before that. And so I stepped away in some way from racing the marathons and focused on something else. And so I became much stronger in the long distance races, but I wasn't sure how that would translate to running the marathon. So it wasn't until 2015 I prepared for the Boston Marathon. And Boston is a really good race for people who come from a trail running background because it's much more undulating. It's one of the hilliest major marathons. And it was an amazing experience for me because I tried so hard in 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9 to run under 2.5 hours. And I was always unsuccessful at that point. But in 2015, I turned up at Boston. I had a training block, which went well before that. But I was still really unsure because I hadn't been racing these types of events. But I turned up in Boston, and suddenly these paces that were really unattainable for me previously was suddenly feeling so smooth and relaxed. And I ended up going running 2 hours 28 and did it, let's not say comfortably, but it was a huge step for me to go under that barrier. And it was amazing having it was amazing because it was really my journey that I needed to go on. I needed to go away from the event for some time and transform myself in some way, and then come back to it. And to have that success was also very deeply meaningful for me.
Yeah, that's kind of translate into like life in general. Sometimes you need to recalibrate your focus or redirect your focus to discover there's another way to reach your goal,
Yeah,
right?
I think that was the lesson for me, that the way I was going about it was not the right way. So just focusing on road running and doing road races, it actually wasn't giving me that joy at some point. It was like I found myself at like a dead end, and my path was not. It was there was no joy going just that way, and I needed to find a different way to approach the same thing because it's still all running, but being out in nature and focusing on running in the mountains and running longer distances gave me so much joy, but also developed all the strength that when I came back to the marathon, then suddenly I could use that to transcend what I'd done previously.
Yeah. Well, beautiful.
So
Do you have anything else? Yes.
I was gonna go back to something that you made this great mention that you made the great comment that we need to have all of the experiences. So if you only have the experience of success, in some ways you become spoiled. And I see
Mm.
that a lot in athletes, like especially junior athletes who are really talented. They only have the experience of success. So you're always racing against your peers. And so if you're the best 15-year-old athlete in your country, you get used to success, and so you go through all of the years and you're always just racing against your own peers. And then it's not until you get into your 20s that you become an open athlete, a senior division, and then you suddenly have to race against all of these other athletes. And very often it's a very difficult transition from being a junior athlete, especially if you're a champion junior athlete, because all you know is winning, and then suddenly you become a senior, and suddenly you're getting 5th or 10th or 11th. And so you see so many incredibly talented athletes give up on the sport because they can't handle that experience of not winning. For them, running or sports was all about the experience of being the champion and winning the race. And when they actually have to deal with the experience of being an also ran, or, being, in the top 10, they can't deal with that. And so they actually walk away from the sport. And so I always think that's really sad that we lose all of these people, these incredibly talented athletes. You never really see their full potential because they've never become able to deal with the experience of not being the champion. And so,
Yeah.
so Sri Chinmoy has this really funny story that he tells. which I find really insightful. That in his community, in his spiritual community, the Sri Aurobindo ashram in Pondicherry, he was the champion athlete. So for many years consecutively, he was the sprinting champion there, and then he was also for some years the champion in the decathlon. But this was a spiritual community that also took sports and physical fitness very seriously. So they would have this big athletics competitions where all of the members of the community would take part. And so, and Sri Chinmoy, for his time and the for being in South India in the 1940s and 50s, he was a remarkably talented athlete. So he was running 11 seconds for the 100 meters, which is like, even by today's standard, is very good. But this was like with 1940s and 1950s tracks and spikes and all of
And
these.
then he was running barefoot on cinder
Yeah,
track.
he was running barefoot. Yeah, so I mean, he was definitely had some amazing talent
Yeah,
for.
one of his coach said that if he was unlucky because if he'd been born in the Western world, he would have had more proper training and he would be able to be, a really world class athlete. But I
Yeah.
think it was not in the cards for Shu Chinmoy to go that route. I mean, he had a different mission, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. But at some point, after many years of being the champion in the sprints, he decided that he wanted to have the experience of finishing last. And so
Yeah,
I thought
I
that
know
was
that story.
I thought that was so sweet and interesting that he was someone, instead of only wanting to have the experience of being the champion, he wanted to have the experience of what it feels like for the guy who finishes eighth in the race. Because he knows already what it's like to finish as the champion. And most people in that situation, they feel as though there's some specialness in just being the champion. And they would never be interested in what it feels like for the guys behind them. But he had this very broad consciousness and awareness that no, he wanted to feel all of the different experiences. And so he attempted to put himself in a situation where he was not going to win the race. And
You know
so
what he did?
what he didn't prepare, or he didn't warm up, I know, but what did he do?
He actually used some of his occult powers to make himself sick. So he gave himself a fever. He said he had the capacity to give himself a fever,
Yeah,
and he did that. Plus, he went, plus he like didn't eat or drink, and
yeah, and
you
I don't
know,
think he warmed up for the race either.
right, didn't warm up. Yes,
And so he did everything he possibly could to make it as hard as possible to have a good outer result. And so, but I mean, the story's really funny in the end, because despite all of that, some inner force came and really pushed him, and and even though he was really trying not to win the race, still there was some force that actually pushed him to win the race, even though everything was set up against him.
yeah,
But for me, the interesting thing was really that he had that oneness with the other striving human beings in the event, and he really wanted to feel what their experience was. And
yes,
one other really funny thing is that one of Sri Chinmoy's brothers was also, Sri Chinmoy was the fastest sprinter, but his brother was the slowest possible sprinter, and his brother would always cheerfully turn up at the sports days and do his very best, even though he was, his sprinting was not his forte. And so I always loved that for Sri Chinmoy, it was like the whole experience was important. Like from the winner to the last place person, each person's experience was equally valuable. And I think that's the great lesson to take from this, that even if we think our capacity is not so great in a particular field, that even the great spiritual masters see value in the last person, the slowest possible person, turning up and giving their best.
yeah. And I have here um, a beautiful little aphorism by Sri Chinmoy about that. Like, who is the winner? Not he who wins, but he who has established his cheerful oneness with the result, which is an experience in the form of failure or success, a journey forward or a journey backward. Who is the winner? Not he who wins the race, but he who loves to run sleeplessly and breathlessly, with God the supreme runner. Who is the winner? Not he whose glory we sing, but he who embodies God's compassion light in abundant measure. Who is the winner? Not he who has acquired tremendous name and fame and amassed a big fortune, but he who requires only one thing, God's satisfaction in God's own way. So that gives a very spiritual spin on
Yeah.
winning and losing. But it's this idea of having a cheerful oneness with the results, like with whether you lose or win. and to feel that even though you can be, maybe you were first, if you can have the oneness with the loser, that's a great. And I love that about the triathlon. So I kind of went into doing triathlons about 4 or 5 years ago, and in the Ironman triathlon, it's kind of it's a ritual or tradition that the winner stays around until the very last person crosses the finish line. And
Yeah.
so the winners in the triathlon, they may take 7.5 to 8 hours, and the cutoff for the triathlon is 16 hours. So the winner, after like he finishes and he showers and eats and whatever, he comes back like in the middle of the night when these last people come in, and he stands at the finish line and kind of welcomes the very last finisher of the race. It's a tradition in the Ironman triathlon.
Yeah,
And it's such a beautiful thing, right? This the real established the oneness between the winner and the loser.
yeah, and I think the long distance races really brings about this shared suffering, or the comradeship. That the person who finished first, he's actually really inspired by the last person, because he knows how difficult it was for him out there for 7 or 8 hours. And then he's thinking to this, oh my God, this person has been doing the same thing, but he's out there for 16 hours. And so, because I see the same thing in ultra marathons, when, especially the long trail races, that often the top runners will turn up um, at the cutoff time to see the last people coming in. And when you're there at that point, it's actually so emotional and beautiful to see these people that have been really giving their best effort, but for twice as long or 3 times as long as the faster athletes took. And so there is something, yeah, I think those races and those distances really brings about some sort of level of humility, because you don't see the 100-meter guy finish and they're
Yeah,
saying, there's just not enough time.
there's no time.
There's no time.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
I've got something that I'd like to talk about a little bit about this, and it's like about that idea of who is the winner, but instead it's like, who is the greatest in any particular field. And I really remember when I read this comment from a mountaineer. His name was Alex Lowe, and he was considered the best mountaineer of his generation. So in the 1980s, he was considered like the preeminent climber in the world. And so he was being interviewed by a climbing magazine, and they said, Alex, you're the best climber in the world. And he said, hang on a second, like, I just want to make a statement around that. Like, he's like, for me, the best climber in the world is the person who's out there right now today enjoying their climbing the most. That person for me is the best climber in the world. And I found that such a remarkable insight that he had taken, that the best person in any particular field is not just the person who is performing it in the highest possible level, or doing it in the fastest way, or the commonly used ways we use to judge who's the best at a particular activity, but instead the person who's doing the activity, but who's loving it and enjoying it and appreciating it the most, that perhaps that person is the best person at the activity. Because perhaps the ideal with the activity is not how fast, or how quickly, or how high you went, or any of those things, but how much joy did someone get through that activity. Perhaps that's a better gauge in the long term of how well you're doing in any particular activity. And I took this example further into the running world, and I actually asked a lot of other coaches and a lot of other athletes, who is the best runner in the world. And so it was really interesting, because everyone would sort of collapse back to that very simplistic metric that we use in our society. Well, at that time, it was Mo Farah was the Olympic gold medalist in the 10,000 meters. So a lot of people at that point, I would say, who's the best runner in the world? And people would say, well, maybe it's Mo Farah, because he's the Olympic gold medalist in the 10,000 meters. And I said to them, though, what if the way that he was going about his winning was he was doing it in a very haughty or prideful way, or he was doing it with a very vindictive or nasty attitude towards his fellow competitors? Like, even if he's winning, is he still the best runner in the world if he's doing it using all of these negative tactics. And it was really interesting because it just allowed people to start to think, oh, there's the result, but there's also the attitude and the way that someone's going about that. Because I could very easily think as well that the best runner in the world today is some unknown person in some unknown country that's out there, but they're so grateful and so appreciative of the experience of their running. They feel so alive, and they just feel so humbled and honored and grateful that they're able to run in that moment. And maybe they're running, 10-minute miles, or they're running, 7 or 8 minute kilometers. And so they're not, by any outer standard, they're not an impressive runner, but they are the person on that day who has really captured the spirit of running more so than anyone else.
Beautiful analogy, beautiful, yeah, beautiful illustration. And I think for that, to enjoy an activity for its own sake is the secret of life. I
Mm.
think it's one of the secrets of how to live well and how to be really successful is to enjoy whatever you're doing in the moment to the maximum.
Yeah,
Like to be there. So that absolutely means that you have to be completely present in the moment. You have to be there fully engaged, fully committed, with all your capacities, with all your abilities and propensities to, yeah, to live life head on and to do whatever you do with enthusiasm, with joy. Yeah, that's a real challenge, and that's
yeah.
I guess, yeah, that's how you measure the real greats in the
And then
world.
every now and then you see an example of it, and people really wake up to it. And it could be Eliud Kipchoge still being out there competing, but no
Yeah.
longer being at the top of the podium. Or very often I see it with really elderly athletes. You see that they're at that point of their life where they're just so grateful to still be able to move and to challenge themselves. And especially when you see at a race, you might have a 70-year-old, or we put races on here in Christchurch, and we had this remarkable gentleman. His name was Ray Bennett, and he was well into it. He was getting close to 90, but he was still come along and shuffle around the races. And at some point, he had some Achilles problems, and I think he tore his Achilles tendon, so which is what connects your calf muscle to your foot. And the doctors wanted to do some surgery on it. And he said, actually, don't bother. Like, I can still shuffle around. Because they were saying if he had the surgery, it would take him out of action for some long period of time. He said, actually, no, let's just not bother. And so it healed up, but the Achilles never healed. So he never had the ability to use his calf muscles anymore. But he would still just run in this lovely shuffling fashion, using his other muscles. So like he was completely boundless. That for him, just being out there moving was the important thing. And so even when they wanted to make his body better to allow him to do it, to continue on, he's like, I'm at the point now where I honestly don't care about performance. Like, I just care about being out there and challenging myself and just moving. And so, yeah, I always felt like he was such a great example of someone doing it for the right reason. Like, he was no
Yeah.
long there was no there was no time goal, there was no outer success that he was looking for. The success was completely the inner experience of still being part of the game. And so, yeah, I was always found Ray to be a wonderful example of that. And so
Yeah, he sounds like a great human being.
So yeah, I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about how people could start to try and bring that sort of mindset into their own lives, because I think that's the disconnect that we're talking about here, is that the model of success that's shown to us by the society we live in is not the same model we're talking about here. So the model of success society has for us, that you need to be young and you need to be beautiful and you need to be strong and healthy and you need to be a winner. It's like that's really the kind of the characters and the sort of model that's put forward, is that's what success looks like, is that you're young and healthy, there's no problems in your life, you've got wealth or success or fame and fortune, and we put those people on a pedestal. And the problem with that is only available to a very, very small number of people and for an incredibly fleeting period of time. Because all of those people are as soon as you make it to the top of the pedestal, like within a year or two, you've been pushed off and there's some other person younger than you or more successful or more talented that has
Well,
come.
I recently watched this documentary, AKA Charlie Sheen. I don't know if you heard about it. It's on
No.
Netflix, about the life of the actor Charlie Sheen. And I don't know if you know about it. He had a, I mean, his life was a complete train wreck in from 2010 until like 2018.
Yeah.
And he had everything. He was beautiful. He was attractive. He was young.
Yeah.
He had all these great movie roles. He was famous. He had tremendous wealth. He had, everything was going his way, and then that's kind of a sometimes it's a recipe for disaster. So he started drinking and using drugs, and then he started going so deep into the drug use that he
Yeah.
became basically a kind of a monster. Like
Yeah.
he started ranting and becoming very unstable, and he actually went on a tour. I mean, this agency just booked him, and you could see that he was completely out of it. Like he was
Nice.
kind of hallucinating and using drugs on stage and shouting, and it was just a train. People would just come there to watch the train wreck.
Yeah, I
It,
remember the time when that was happening, and it felt like, yeah, it felt like a really wrong way to help someone when they're struggling.
totally. Yeah. And the great thing about the documentary is now he has been sober for 8 years. He's
Yeah.
now 62 years old, and he looks like a totally normal human being. Like you can see in his face, he is okay. He's back to normal. Like when
Yeah.
they show pictures of that period, he also says when he sees that, he says there's just shivers of shame going through him
Yeah.
because at the time he was so arrogant and so like you could see that was totally a hostile force in him. Some force took over his
Yeah.
personality basically. And yeah, I mean it's all the trappings of success. That's why they call it the trappings of success, right? Name, fame, wealth can sometimes lead you into absolute disaster.
Yeah.
We have a saying in my language that you have to have strong shoulders to carry um, the weight of name and fame, the weight of fame. You have
Yeah,
to have very
I
strong
I
shoulders.
like that saying, and what it makes me think of is there's two great tragedies in life, and one is to receive or achieve what you wanted, and the other is not to achieve it.
Yeah,
And so there's actually a great tragedy of finding yourself in that position of achieving what everyone else sort of strives towards. Because the thing is, if you're the person and you still believe that what I need is more money and more success and more fame, and you at least have a glimmer of hope. You're thinking, oh well, I'm not happy now, my life's not going well now, but maybe if I make that extra money, or I get famous, or I achieve something, then I will be happy. And so those people, the tragedy for them is that they haven't achieved what they're aiming for yet. So there's some level of the disconnect from where they are and where they want to be. But at least they still have hope that maybe when I get there, then I'll be happy. The great tragedy for those people who do achieve the great success is realizing that it doesn't provide what they were looking for. They thought, oh, if I became famous and rich, then I'll be happy. And they've actually achieved that, and they're on the top of the pedestal, and they realize how unbelievably lonely it is there. And they realize how unbelievably empty and meaningless it is to achieve these things. And so it's an incredible tragedy for those people as well. And so what I want to think a little bit about is how do we actually go about setting up our life in a way that actually sets our goals, and that what is success and what is failure look like. How do we set that for living a life like of spirituality and progress? Like what would
well, it seems like you just described a great paradox, right? So
Yeah.
there's a tragedy if you achieve it, and there's a tragedy if you don't achieve it. So it seems like
Yeah.
there's no way out of it. It's like there's always tragedy. But
Yeah.
then I guess the way out of it would be you don't actually need anything.
Yeah.
You're not you don't there's no want. Like if you dive within, all the treasures that you need are inside. All the peace, the joy, the meaning, the love, it's all there. And that is what you actually need. And if you achieve that, of course, then there is happiness and fulfillment. But I think in the paradox that you mentioned, they talk about the outer things, the things that are
Exactly.
outside of us.
Yeah.
So when
And
we
so
look for anything outside of us, it can never fulfill us. That's
Yeah. What
the
you want to
meaning.
learn there is you're playing the wrong game. So if you're playing the game of success in the outer sense, like name and fame and wealth and all of these things, that is a game that never leads anywhere. And we've talked about that previously as well. That, like, if you don't win, you lose. But if you also if you win, you also lose in that game. Like,
Yeah.
Lee Sheen was a great example of someone who won, and it was like catastrophic tragedy. And
And his slogan was, "I'm winning, I'm winning." He had this tattoo on his arm called "Winning," and it was like he was saying that at the height of his complete train wreck of a life, that he
oh
was
god.
completely winning. It's just
So what I like to think about is that there should be a way of playing the game of life where we find meaning and purpose in the process of going about our day-to-day life. It's not where, because if you make your success and happiness contingent on some external place or circumstances or things being set up in a certain way, you're always putting yourself at risk of the world changing. And that's what we've got to always remember, that the outside world, the material world around us, is full of chaos. It's constantly changing, it's constantly moving, and there's never a sense of long-term stability. So like your circumstances at the moment, you may think, wow, this is great. Like I want these outer circumstances for the rest of my life. And obviously that can't happen because at some point your house is going to, be demolished, or there's going to be some civil unrest, or there's going to be some change in the circumstances around you that's going to force you to move to a different position. So if your whole focus was like, this is the exact right circumstances for me, and like anything else I'll be unhappy with, and I only want things to remain like this. And you see that often for people, that they get stuck in a rut, they get stuck in a position or a place where they think that this is the way things have to be. And then things obviously change, like your loved ones get sick or pass away, your children move to a different country, your friends move somewhere else, and so all of those circumstances around you are constantly changing. And so, and you talked about like the old man, and I think that's the cantankerous old man is a great example or an analogy of what happens when you don't have a philosophy of acceptance and transformation. Because you see someone who finds themselves in a position where they're no longer willing to update themselves with the changing world around them. And so they say, right, I'm happy exactly how I am. I don't want to ever change again. And so it's like you've collapsed your life down to this one character. But meanwhile, the world is continuing to move on. New ideas are coming up, new ways of dressing, and you'll see the sort of that caricature of the old man. He's always looking outside. He's like, what is wrong with these young people? Look at them with their crazy fashions and their crazy styles, and so the world is constantly moving away from that person, and he's becoming more and more resentful and unhappy with his life, because he's no longer part of the world. He's no longer transforming and keeping up to date. And so I think there has to be a constant openness and acceptance to the changing nature of life. And we have to constantly be updating ourselves. If we think that we ever the finished product, that's when we start to suffer, because we've made ourselves too solid and too rigid and fixed. And that is never a successful character to be in this world. Like the successful person in this world is someone who's constantly willing to change and transform and update. It's almost like you need to constantly update yourself, because the world in a week is not the same as it was today. And so if I don't update myself in some small unseen way to anyone else, but it's like I need to constantly be paying attention and interacting and accepting with the world around me. And that allows me to keep moving forward in the world. And as soon as I think I'm a finished product, I never want to change again, like I like this character the way he is, that's just a recipe for disaster.
but how do you know what kind of updates you need? I mean, how do you go about that?
Yeah. So my thing is to really always pay attention as much as possible to the world around me. And so that's not that I'm making the outside world my goal, that I need to achieve something or I need to take something, but it's really being very mindful. And so what mindfulness is, just as a reminder for everyone, is a mindfulness is a practice of being where you are, of doing what you're doing. So when I'm hanging out the laundry, I'm hanging out the laundry. When I'm driving my car, I'm actually in my car driving my car. I'm not thinking about or doing 100 other things. It's being completely present to what is happening in that moment. And
And
for
it sounds very simple, but it's actually very difficult because we have the
yeah,
mind that is constantly roaming. So we are completely distracted from what we are actually doing. And that's why
yeah.
we're never really fully present.
No, and so when we can get ourselves to that place of being fully present, it's intuitively in that moment we're connecting with the field of experiences around us. So we're connecting with the environment, we're connecting with the energies, and through that experience, it transforms you because you're taking in information that you didn't have before. So if I'm really present out there and I'm at the park and I'm walking around and I'm really feeling the feeling of the gravel, on the path moving between my feet, and I'm really feeling the wind blowing, and I'm really experiencing the cherry blossoms or the rhododendrons are blossoming, or whatever is happening. There's a huge amount of information around me, and when I'm opening myself in that way, it's there's a communication happening in an unseen fashion. And I find that that's why people feel good when they go out in nature, because if you go out and spend time in nature, you're at least going to spend a few moments, hopefully, where you're really present to the beauty of the nature around us. And I think that's where this update comes from. It's often very hard if you're in a big city and you're surrounded by other people and you're surrounded by just the busyness of life. You often feel like you never feel grounded and settled, and you always feel a little bit agitated. And so, if wherever you live, just spending some time just going out in nature, because the natural world is the real world in some ways. Like our society is a human construct. So it's inside nature, but it's been formulated and created in some ways by our minds and our consciousness. And so it also picks up some of the problems that are inherent to our being will be in the creation, because we've built this society, we've built these streets and buildings and these ways of doing things, and so that has some of these problems that we're dealing with. But you step out of that and you actually really go back into nature, and you're walking on the beach. Like, nothing there is man-made. Like, the nature of the beach is the sand and the wind and the waves, and it's been created by this force, by this divine creative force. And so being there and being really present to this, I think it connects us back in again to that divine creative force which is inside nature, which is molding us and shaping us. And so being really there and present, I think that for me is one of the most powerful ways to stay up to date.
And I would also add meditation. So going within. So I think inside us is that same divine nature. And when we meditate, we can really still our thoughts. We do the practice and eventually become expert meditators or good meditators. You can really feel like when I do my morning meditation, after that, I feel such a cheerfulness very often, a joy and enthusiasm and inspiration for life. And it's like, yes, I'm ready for the day. I go out with energy. And even though I am in a big city, when I'm on my bicycle to work, very often I feel as if I'm in the middle of nature, as if there's no buildings. It's just this very peaceful, beautiful surroundings. And now you will say, of course, I live in Amsterdam, so I'm a little bit lucky that way to have all this beautiful architecture around me. I don't live in a big city with high rise and big skyscrapers,
Yeah,
but even there, I'm
put
sure.
you in Los Angeles and we'll get you on a bike path
Yeah,
along the freeway, for like
that is the
20
best.
miles in a straight line, with
That
all
is
the
the
cars.
ultimate test. If I can do it there, then I really prove that it's true. So I think I can still do that in LA and Las Vegas and
Yeah,
still feel, because yeah, if you have the peace inside, then you see it everywhere outside. It's whatever's within is without, right? If there's chaos within, you will experience and see chaos without.
yeah.
And both are there. Of course, chaos is there and peace is there, but it's whatever is inside you that brings out the reality outside you as well and
Yeah.
resonates with.
Yeah, and I think that's always a good reminder that if you can do your spiritual practices and feel connected to that deeper, more divine, more fulfilling part of your being, that will carry you through almost any outer circumstances. It almost doesn't matter how difficult or how challenging or how beautiful or how ugly the world is around you at any particular moment. You will still see, because the ugliness or the beauty in some ways is skin deep in the world. Because even if you're in a situation where it seems like ugly and messy, there's still this tremendous, like if you can see through the eyes of that divine creative force, you'll see, because this is actually an interesting idea. When we see something as ugly, we're seeing it as a failure. And so
Mm.
we're taking it as a finished product. So if I'm in some developing part of the world and I'm in some area and it's smelly, there's like sewage and, the buildings are really, decrepit or, just really temporary. If I take that as the final achievement of that place, I would say, oh, what a failure. It's like, this is so ugly and difficult and painful to be here.
We have this saying, a failed state, right? We say
Yeah.
that about countries, failed states.
But we forget, like, if I was walking in Amsterdam 500 years ago, someone might be throwing sewage out the window, on the road and,
Yeah.
into some gutter. And so we kind of take it for granted that say, in Europe or North America or in New Zealand, where we have developed our society to, outwardly to a good standard. We think that was, oh, well, that's what our society, that is what it's like. But
That's normal. That's
but
actually not normal
we had
in a
so
way.
we had so many failures to get to that point. So
Yeah.
so that's the thing as well, that when we're in a place and we see ugliness, not to see it as a failure, but instead to see that as an experience on the way to success. And I mean, that'll be a beautiful thing to go to the slums of Mumbai or to the slums in in Nigeria and or in Kenya. They've got some huge slums there, but we see it now and we say, oh, what a failure, like this is such a terrible thing. But this is perhaps a necessary stepping stone to the success and the flourishing of that place and that culture and that society. And it would be beautiful to be able to see in 1,000 years or 500.
Yeah, it's like this idea of the flower that is blossoming, right? It takes if you look at a flower at a seed and you just start looking at it, it takes a long time before there's a flower and everything. But if you have the video there and you play it in fast speed,
Yeah,
these nature films, you see that the flower just shoots out. And so if you have that view of the world and you zoom out and you can see 10,000 years in the blink of a second,
yeah,
you would see all these things totally moving constantly, coming up, societies coming up and going down and coming up again and flourishing and kind of descending. So there's this constant movement in the world, but I think ultimately it's all striving towards perfection. It's striving towards completion, wholeness, because that's inside us, right? There is a very deep urge inside us for perfection, for completeness, and for wholeness, and we know it when we see it.
yeah.
And I'm reminded of this book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. I wanted to talk about that a little bit. It's a book that was written in the 70s by this American guy, Robert Pirsig. And he was a kind of amateur philosopher. When he wrote this book just out of the blue, it's an amazing book, and it has a story of its own. And it's a road trip that he takes with his son through the United States on a motorcycle. And then the motorcycle breaks down at some point, and he starts to really look at it, what's wrong. And he realizes that when he takes the time to really look at the motorcycle and just be present and have no preconceived notion of what it could be, but just to open himself to the motorcycle that's malfunctioning, he said that at that moment, the solution came to him. It was almost as if the motorcycle gave it to him, like the soul of the motorcycle, and he kind of intuitively felt what was wrong with it. And then he repaired it and he was on his way. And he said it gave him so much satisfaction, this act of repairing the motorcycle with complete presence of mind, that he said that is a metaphor for life. So he called this quality with a capital Q. So for his big idea that he develops in the novel is the idea that quality is something that cannot be defined. We cannot make a definition of what quality is, but it's something that every single human being recognizes when you see it. So when you see a great work of art, you can see and feel it has quality. If you see a great piece of engineering or a great building or a great piece of architecture, when it has this quality with a capital Q, when it has real quality, you see it, you feel it, you know it. And his idea or his notion, his theory was that quality will always spread, will always come to the surface and multiply and be known. It will spread and it will be known. And that idea is that if a work has this quality, it will become well known. And so I have to think about the paintings of Van Gogh, our most famous painter from the Netherlands. He painted hundreds of paintings. He didn't sell a single painting during his entire life. It was a very tragic life in a sense.
Yeah.
But his paintings has had this quality with a capital Q. He took everything inside his paintings. He was a master painter, and so now they sell for millions. And this is the proof of this idea that when something has quality, Shakespeare was complete unknown for centuries after he written all his plays and poems and sonnets. It was only when this guy called Ben Jonson, I think in the 18th century, rediscovered Shakespeare and brought it out into the open that
Is that right?
it became well known.
Wow.
Yeah, it took another guy to recognize the quality in the work and to kind of spread it. And now, of course, everybody knows and reads Shakespeare. Um, and Robert Pirsig himself, like he kind of became a little bit mad with the idea. He describes it in the book. He said at some point it was so overwhelming, it was such a change of paradigm that he kind of became a little bit mentally incapacitated. He almost became crazy, he said. But he kind of recovered from that. But I love this idea that quality, and he said that the conditions for this quality to arise is to be fully present in the moment and to engage with the work as a meditation. He didn't describe it like that, but that's how I understood it. It was like the work itself was a meditation, an act of being fully present and doing the best you can do. And then when you are in that process, that is what is also described nowadays as flow, right? This term flow, when everything is time kind of disappears, you are completely immersed in the activity, and then that's when quality is created. It's like when you're completely there, there's no thoughts to distract you. You are one with the activity, and that's a beautiful thing to achieve. And I think that is ultimately what brings us success. It's when we can be open to the activity, to be fully present in it, and to do the best we can. And that's when we bring to the fore the quality that we have inside us. And the interesting thing about his books is that this book he wrote actually has a Guinness World Record of being offered to the most publishing companies ever before being published.
Really?
Nobody wanted to. It was so unusual. Nobody wanted to publish it, and he went to 182 publishers before it was picked up, and before somebody had the courage to publish it, and it became a complete bestseller. It sold millions of copies worldwide.
Yeah.
It's an all-time. It's still a cult classic. And if anyone is listening and wants a good read, this is an absolutely excellent book. Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And so he himself proved, his work had quality, and no matter how long it took, it eventually came to the fore. It doesn't have to come to the fore immediately. It may take a few centuries, but eventually it will come. And
It,
look at Jesus, for instance. Jesus' life full of quality, like a real spiritual master, but fairly unknown in his time. I mean, he was maybe locally known, but after he passed away, after he was crucified, he was forgotten for centuries. Like the Christianity was a very small, kind of like very unknown sect persecuted by the Romans, and then eventually almost petered out until this Roman emperor had this spiritual experience of Jesus and resurrected Christianity and made it the state religion in like 300 BC after Christ. And that's when Christianity started to flourish and became, spread all over the Western world. And again, quality, it was there all from the beginning, but it just took time to manifest.
yeah, and I like the idea that he had 182 failures with trying to offer the book for publishing, and that he still was undeterred. And so it's like Sri Chinmoy with his 315 attempts at the that particular weight. It's this willingness just to keep showing up. And there's a great there's a great idea from one of the top running coaches in the world, and he calls it CC equals EE, and what it stands for is um, consistent competency equals eventual excellence. And it's like if we just keep turning up and doing the best we can, at some point we're going to reach our own highest standard of excellence. And it doesn't mean you're going to be the world champion, but whatever is the standard of excellence for you, how you achieve it is not one particular session or one particular activity, but it's just consistently turning up and doing your best you can on that day. So just doing a competent effort on a daily basis. And that's the same with your spiritual practice or any practice. That's what we're asking for, is just consistently turning up and doing what you can on that particular day.
Hey, and that's what we're doing with the podcast. I mean, our podcast, you could say, is a complete failure. We don't have a lot of listeners. We don't have a lot of subscribers, but we believe in it. We believe in our content. And I think when we just keep showing up and keep doing our best, the
Yeah.
listeners will eventually come.
Yeah, and there's also the growth and the experience of doing the podcast, of doing whatever activity is. And if you
Yeah.
can always in your life keep bringing it back to the actual experiences you're having, that seems to be a much deeper foundation than always looking for some external validation of what you're doing. Because if you're doing the thing and you feel as though the thing is meaningful and important when you're doing it, that for me is much more valuable and real than doing it and then looking for what was the numbers or what was my placing or what was my, the external outcome. And yeah, I really think that for people, it's that mindset of choosing to have faith in the universe, because when you truly have faith that there is some greater force at play than our individual consciousness, and we can all feel that, and we can all know that, and so some people will posit it, it's the blind and dumb force, and it doesn't care for us at all, and it's just the force of evolution moving things on. Even if you believe that, but if especially if you believe that that force has a good intention towards you, it wants to give you the opportunity to grow and flourish and blossom to your full potential, then you want to take the experiences and the circumstances you're having as the best possible ones for your progress. And we've talked about that before, but it's choosing to believe and accept that, okay, I can't see exactly how my life is supposed to look. I can't see the plan and how I'm supposed to achieve my goals. And it's really even unclear for most of us, like what our goals even should be, like what we should actually be aiming towards. But what we do know is if on a daily basis we can be present and we can offer the best of ourselves, if we can consistently turn up and do a competent effort in our lives, but do it from the right intention and do it from a place of trying to be as present as possible and trying to bring our awareness into our day-to-day lives. I think just like with the idea with the motorcycle maintenance, like, if you had a broken good or product in front of you and you're not exactly sure how it works, but if you made yourself completely present and one with the object, you would start to notice things about the object that, okay, something here is not fitting in with the whole. There's some parts of it that seem as though there's some sort of dysfunction in them. And so I think that's what he was saying. He was looking at the whole, and then he was realizing by being completely present that some parts of it there was some anomalies. Some parts of it were creating disharmony with the rest. And the thing is, we may not know how our life should look perfectly going forward, or what our life should look like in a month or a year's time, but we can really pay attention to our life in the present moment. And if we do that from a very objective position, if we try and be pure awareness, be the eternal watcher, if we actually sit there in our own lives and look at it from the viewpoint of the eternal, or from the watcher, that the consciousness that's beyond and behind our everyday consciousness.
The
If we
Purusha.
Yeah, if we look at our life from that perspective, we will start to see parts of our lives that are disharmonious, that are in some ways broken or some ways just lacking some finesse or some skill. So even though we may not know where we want to be in a year's time, I think all of us could look at our lives really clearly and from that higher perspective and see areas. Oh, okay, this area I'm out of integrity, or this area I need to transform in this way, or this area, because you'll start to see that there's those areas that are not matching with the flow or the energy that you're trying to have present in your life. And
Yeah,
so,
and life will bring that forward. I mean, if
yeah,
you're conscious or aware, your friends, the people around you, your colleagues, those things that are not working out in your life, or let's say the defects, just like in a motorcycle, life will bring them to the fore, and it just needs your conscious awareness to first accept it and then to try and transform them.
yeah, and then that it requires a great letting go of these stories that we tell ourselves, because we're often trying to hide our true nature from ourselves. So we tell stories about how good we are or how great we are, or we also tell stories about how bad we are and how terrible we are. And so both of those things are not a complete picture. And I think learning to see your life as it truly is the greatest skill that you can have. Because then, if you can see your life as it truly is, you can start to adjust your actions and your behaviors and your ways of going about things and make your life more harmonious and make yourself a better instrument for this divine creative force to act itself out in the world.
Yes. Um, Talking about failure, I read a few parts in Sri Chinmoy's writing where he talks about how in God's eyes nobody is a failure. So if
Yes.
we really zoom out to the farthest point, there is actually no such thing as failure, and I like that idea as well. Um, and I had to think about this person that you listened to his podcast and you told me about, that this is a person who remembers the moment between his um, death and his rebirth. So the
Yes.
moment when he was in the higher world, in the soul's world. Do you remember his name?
No, but it's called pre-birth experiences. He remembers
Yeah,
his experiences prior to being born here.
exactly. And what I took away from that, it was a really interesting story. It's very juicy. It's like all these things that happen before we are born in the higher worlds, in the soul's world. Um, but what I took away from the story was when he was in the soul's world as a soul, so not at all a human being. And this was before he even took incarnations, even before he started the game of life here on Earth. He was in the soul's world with countless other souls. So in the soul's world, there are a countless infinite number of souls that are there and that are just being or enjoying or going through various other experiences, but they're not incarnating on Earth.
And I think in some ways there's just as we have a huge number of countries and different cultures here on Earth, the same in the inner world. There's all these different worlds where particular types of souls congregate together. So particular, it's like a particular world within that higher world. And so he was in one particular space where he was surrounded by the same type of souls as him.
Yes. And then at some point, he met a soul that looked extremely bright and beautiful. And he was just amazed by that, how beautiful the soul looked and how much light it had. And he went up to the soul and asked it, wow, how come you're so beautiful and so bright? And this soul told him, I'm playing a new game. It's the game of incarnations on Earth. And he'd never heard of it. The soul had never even heard of it. So this big, beautiful soul explained it to him and said, well, this is a very tough game. You go into the physical nature, you go down into physical body, and then you have experiences in the world as a human being. And eventually he learned about this game. And I don't know how that went, but apparently there was, this game of incarnations was going on, and more and more souls became aware of it. And he started to do that himself. And eventually, after a few incarnations, after a few human lives on Earth, he met this soul again, right, in the higher worlds. And now he himself had also grown. And so he said that by doing this thing, this really hard thing, which is incarnating in the physical on Earth, in this dense three-dimensional world, it beautifies the soul to know absolutely, to a very large extent. Like it makes the soul beautiful, shine bright, and all these really kind of life is tough here on Earth. Like all these tough experiences that we go through in the physical, we are limited. Like The main quality in this world is, you could say, it's limitation. In the soul's world, we are unlimited. We are an unlimited soul. We have no boundaries. We have infinite peace. We have light and joy. But here on earth, everything is limited. It's three-dimensional. We're kind of in this physical body. But then when we go through these experiences and grow, the soul also becomes more luminous, more divine, more bright. And so that to me is a testament to every single human being here on earth has
Yeah.
chosen to leave that very comfortable space up there in heaven or in the soul's world and come down and do this really hard thing. So we can congratulate every single human being, no matter how downtrodden they appear to be, no matter how much of a quote unquote failure they feel themselves to be. They're an unbelievable success in this other perspective because they have taken the courage to come down here and play the game of incarnations and life on earth. So congratulations to all of you out there for doing that.
Yeah.
You're an
So,
absolute
so that's the perfect example of that. No one is a failure in God's eyes.
yes, exactly. Wonderful.
Yeah, wonderful.
Do you
Well,
have anything to add?
I
We're
think
approaching our cutoff time.
yeah, I think that's a really good story to end with there. That's a really nice point.
Great. Okay. Well, let's end it there then. And thank you so much, dear listeners, if you joined us this far. And if you like the podcast, consider subscribing, tell a friend, or leave a comment or a review. And we'll see you again in 2 weeks with a new episode.
Yes, enjoy. Thank you.
Thanks.